In the last lecture, we talked about speaker-audience commonalities, being deliberate about framing, highlighting the areas where you and your audience are in agreement. You can't duck disagreement, but you don't want to ignore areas of agreement as well. Now let's go ahead and shift and talk a little bit about topic-audience commonalities, where you're talking about your topic in a way that invites agreement. You're talking about some of its best qualities. And at the very least, you're not inviting disagreement by virtue of your phrasing and discussion of your topic. So we can come at this from a number of different angles. I think one very beneficial way is to actually go back to something we watched last week. So we watched that Seattle Mayor at the time, Greg Nichols, clip with the bike messenger. So I want you to watch that again, but this time, rather than thinking about the argumentative strategy that's going on there, certainly we've talked about that, now really pay attention to the language that he is using. The language he's using for talking about helmet laws. So let's go ahead and take a listen to that now.
Back to the streets of Seattle and Westlake Plaza. We took our cameras there earlier this week to see what was on people's minds, and here's what we learned.
Why is there a helmet law? Like, I think it's pretty much my head, and what I do with my own head is my problem, not, the rest of everybody else's.
And the bike messenger who talks about the helmet law.
Yeah.
Is that something that should just be his concern, or should it be everyone's concern?
That is his head. But if he hurts himself and becomes disabled, then it becomes all of our responsibility. He ends up at Harborview for months and months and years, being paid for by public tax dollars. So it is kind of a shared responsibility. And the King County Board of Health, appropriately, I believe, has said that helmets are required. And I'm sorry if it inconveniences him in his profession, but frankly, it would inconvenience him a lot more if he falls and his brain is damaged, and then it hurts the taxpayers and the rest of us as well.
So in that, what I hope you're hearing is he's using terms for talking about, not only his audience, that bike messenger, or people who are listening, but for talking about the very issue. He's got phrases like, this is all of our responsibility. This is a shared responsibility. We're talking about public tax dollars, the taxpayers and the rest of us. Those are very deliberately chosen phrases that invite agreement more than they do disagreement. Now, these don't eliminate the possibility of a counter-argument, so it's not like he's lying or minimizing or cutting off the possibility of further debate. Those terms do not end further discussion. You can argue about whether or not it is actually a shared responsibility, but they do augment, those choices do augment the argument through deliberate word choice. Okay? So by using the term shared responsibility, it only heightens what his argument is. Okay? So that's kind of what I mean by framing language, by strategic language use. Not lying, by no means, not even minimizing discussion and debate, but finding the terms that speak to the core of what your proposal is about. We can also see this to another example, much bigger example. So this is back when John F. Kennedy was running for president in the 1960 as the candidate against Richard Nixon. And at the time, there were many, certainly had gotten into the press, who actively voiced concerns that a Catholic president would be beholden to the Pope and not to the American public. And so JFK went sort of to the heart of Protestant concerns by speaking to a group of Southern Protestant ministers. And in the speech, he asserts his independence from Rome and as a government official. And I'm gonna play this clip from the end of the speech, because he ends the speech by talking about how this affects him and his audience as a collective. What is the topic here? What is the true issue here that American citizens have to deal with? And so I want you to take a listen to this, and we'll talk a little bit more about it.
If I should lose on the real issues, I shall return to my seat in the Senate, satisfied that I tried my best and was fairly judged. But if this election is decided on the basis that 40 million Americans lost their chance of being president on the day they were baptized, then it is the whole nation that will be the loser in the eyes of Catholics and non-Catholics around the world, in the eyes of history, and in the eyes of our own people.
So in that section, what he's doing is he's moving the speech beyond the individual concern to the next level. He's raising it to the realm of values. And so he's suggesting to vote against him specifically because he's Catholic actually does damage to the values of the country. It does damage in terms of what the message that we're sending to the rest of the world, and what does it say to those individuals who just happen to be born Catholic. So he's talking about the topic, talking about the issue in a way that gets to the core of his argument, but really does a lot to invite agreement rather than disagreement. So as I had you do in the last video lecture, I would ask you to think about a speech that you're working on, either for this class or for some other venue. And think through that topic and phrasing of that topic. What are just five nouns or phrases that describe your topic? So something I've worked on in the past, or helped people work on, is a while back we had a debate here in Washington, and we've had this in a number of places here in the US, about mandatory vaccines against HPV, human papillomavirus. Human papillomavirus is usually transmitted through sexual contact, it's genital warts, but it can be knocked out with a vaccine as long as you get there before people have had that contact with the virus. Anyway, so people are arguing for and against it. Some people are arguing against the vaccine because they suggested it might encourage premarital sex if the threat of HPV was gone. Nevertheless, in describing that and thinking through that topic, we wanted to think through how to reframe, how to understand the vaccine. So I'm trying to think in terms of analogies or other terms. Well, I can talk about how this vaccine is safe, how it is cheap, how it's like the polio vaccine in that sense. And so being able to rephrase or rethink that topic matter in terms that invite agreement rather than disagreement. So I'd ask you to think through that now, and then in the next lecture, we're actually going to get deeper into this and really analyze two cases of strategic language use.